I'm sorry. This is just introduction. So this is from Bataille. It's his version of the Teotihuacan birth of the sun story. So please feel free to take one with you. I'll be referring to it, so it's here too. All right. I need my paper. Yeah. I suppose I could read the board, but so bear with me. I may skip a bit here. This paper discusses Girard's essay, Teotihuacan. It's really the only thing I think he's ever written on Mesoamerica or Latin America, which you will find is chapter 5 of The Scapegoat, where he introduces the literary genre stereotypes of persecution as a critical tool for interpreting ancient myths. The purpose of this analysis is to investigate the conduct of humans with regard to violence and the rise of religion. Drawing on a general definition of stereotypes, we can grasp Girard's approach to the past as one which also conveys a critical modern perspective. Stereotypes generally are a standardized mental picture that is held in common by members of a group and that represents an oversimplified opinion, prejudiced attitude, or uncritical judgment. That's kind of the way we think of stereotype. In our day, a stereotype of persecution is a genre frequently employed to refer to an unfair and untrue belief that many people have about all people or things that have or represent a particular characteristic of a group. Girard boldly argues with compelling examples that if we can perceive all, or at least some of 4 basic stereotypes that indicate the excruciating experience of persecution, then we can go deeper in analyzing the truth about violence and its role in ancient narratives that have become myths. Here the task is to ask what violent reality lay behind any particular story, but most especially in narratives about origins. For COV&R 24, I ask you to consider, is there any moment more propitious than here, now at San Ildefonso, to examine Girard's insightful essay, Teotihuacan? Precisely here in La Ciudad de Mexico, where Girardistas have gathered at the heart of what was once the ancient Mexica Aztec capital of the Triple Alliance. I say propitious because it is important to understand that on this site where we sit now, in the year 1521, the conquistadors from Spain violently began their reorganization of an entire civilization. They were not alone, of course. They had the advantage of many mimetic allies who were indigenous rivals of the conquered Aztecs. Be that as it may, we should keep in mind that in 1325, several centuries before the Europeans arrived, it was in this central part of the city where we have gathered that the Mexica Aztecs founded their city, Tenochtitlan. They established an initial settlement that would become the heart of their extensive and much feared empire. And I don't know where we're at here, but I meant to... I need Andrew to help me here. Well, I'll just continue. Mexico derives its name from the Mexica Aztecs, a nomadic people who came to the Central Valley and settled on the island of Lake Texcoco. All of Mexico City is sitting on a lake. Girard's singular but brief sojourn into one particular mythic narrative from Mesoamerica was motivated in part by its popularity in France. French philosopher Georges Bataille examined the sacrificial practices of the Aztecs in his 1969 book, The Accursed Share. Bataille held up Aztec civilization as an example of how surplus energy in any system, natural or cultural, must be expended. It was his economic view that the expenditure of surplus energy in consumption is what most notably defines the social relations of any society. It is not scarcity or utility which shape a great civilization, but rather excess and exuberance. For Bataille, the available facts about the Aztecs and other peoples provided him a ready trove of evidence for his theory. Girard, however, is drawn not to Bataille's economic views, but the foundational myth about sacrifice that Bataille was attracted to for his economic analysis. Using Bataille's version of an origin myth, the Aztecs had appropriated, and that's the copy I have here if you want to look at it afterward, or just read chapter 5 of the Scapegoat. Using Bataille's version, Girard probes into what he perceives to be a text of persecution. Girard reads the Aztec myth differently from Bataille, seeing its importance not in economic terms, but through the critical lens of mimetic rivalry. What fascinates Girard is the question of why exactly the Aztecs would want to project a sacrificial narrative upon the ruins of a long ago fallen society they never knew. Why would the Aztecs dare to mimic a monumental greatness that rose and fell centuries before they developed their own capital of Tenochtitlan? Is it surprising that the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan was laid out with many similar architectural features of Teotihuacan? For Girard, the story of the Aztecs tell of the gods who long ago gathered in darkness to supposedly sacrifice themselves voluntarily at Teotihuacan. To him, it suggests a hidden, untold story. He suspects historical foul play, and thus perceives a woeful prehistoric tale of crisis that likely resulted in collective violence against victims in an attempt to establish a world of order. Girard applies mimetic theory to argue that the solution to the social chaos at the beginning of Mesoamerican society and civilizations was not voluntary, but rather involuntary sacrifice. The mysterious ruins the Aztecs called Teotihuacan, which means the city or place of the gods, the gathering place of the gods, provides a perfect canvas upon which to paint an origin narrative. To tell of what occurred at Teotihuacan serves well the formation of Aztec identity over many generations. It is an appealing type of narrative because it could help hide their historical insecurity as a people, distinguishing in glorious mythos what in fact was their humble beginnings as Chichimec, or barbarian outsiders and nomads. When the Mexica Aztec and other Nahuatl-speaking peoples first arrived to the valleys of the Central Basin, the Mexica migrants from the northern deserts came with a reputation of being mere wandering dogs, wretched scavenging nomads. Over time, Aztec leaders and rulers came to understand from all the peoples they met along the way that with a good creation myth in your pocket, you could easily proffer a claim to power and status. No matter how small, a claim with divine purpose was all the more convincing. And so eventually, with a little luck for justifying a sense of manifest destiny to imperial dominance, the Mexica Aztec arose in glory. Archaeologists and other scholars of Mesoamerica seem to concur with this profound ontological need among the Aztecs to be a people very much like those who once lived in Teotihuacan. This is evidenced by how many times there was the periodic ritual visits of Aztec rulers to the so-called City of Gods. Scholars speculate that these visits were meant to help the Mexica reimagine, justify, and mimetically represent how the cosmos itself came into being and what their placement and true purpose was within it. According to the myth, the fundamental ingredient required for the birth of the sun, the moon, and the stars was an explicit act of self-sacrifice on the part of the gods themselves. It is this glorification of self-immolation which caused Girard's hedgehog sensibility. His critical intuition and rereading of this particular myth raises a crucial question. Was it really voluntary self-sacrifice that gave birth to the cosmos and Aztecs' claim to power? Or was it true, actual violence, perhaps most particular religious violence, as in the ritual sacrificing of others, victims offered up for the greater good, albeit against their will? This is the fundamental research question Girard develops throughout the essay Teotihuacan in his book, The Scapegoat. The remains of this once mighty city-state can be explored today, located about 47 kilometers from where we are now. And at its apex, the Aztec pyramid that the Aztecs built here, right next door to us, had two altars at its apex, one for the ancient Mesoamerican god of rain and one for the sun god Huitzilopochtli. So the Aztecs were borrowing from the Teotihuacanos many ideas and inspirations when they built their big city. So dropping down here, I'm going to skip to Página 5. Página 5. The Aztecs could never have imagined modern archaeology's discoveries about ancient Teotihuacan. We know today, for example, that prior to the imperial pretensions of the Aztecs, a good many centuries before, the Teotihuacanos had somehow achieved an extensive cultural and commercial influence far to the south into Maya territories of what is today Chiapas and Guatemala. Girard encounters ancient Teotihuacan not through anthropology or archaeology, but through the philosophical and economic considerations of Georges Bataille. It is Bataille's summary of the Aztec myth of the birth of the sun that provides Girard with the basic material for his argument. And that's what I want to get to here. Like other narratives that attempt to explain origins and how things began, the causes of why something comes into existence, etc., for René Girard, what any ancient narrative proposes as an explanation may not hold up under scrutiny. While the Aztecs wanted to explain the origins of the sun, moon, and stars as the fruit of generous self-sacrifice on the part of the gods themselves, a closer look by Girard suggests that there is much more to consider in this mythic origin story. For from self-sacrifice, which seems so noble, magnanimous, and generative, Girard argues that this particular origin narrative, projected onto ancient Teotihuacan, is an attempt to veil a prehistoric reality of a violent victimage mechanism. Girard's analysis carefully considers whether the four stereotypes that mark the genre of persecution texts are applicable in this case. In the myth of Teotihuacan and the origin of the cosmos, Girard argues that communities in the formative period of Mesoamerica likely opted to sacrifice the vulnerable for a very good reason: to maintain a source of light and warmth, security and protection, and thus find and enjoy, as long as possible, social order and peace. As usual, Girard does not shy away from his bold arguments and brings plenty of evidence to support his hypothesis. So what follows is a synopsis of the myth itself, and I'll run through that really quickly. I got the shortest version I could find in Smith's book, The Aztecs. Once the earth people, and this is Página 6, once upon the earth, people and maize had been created, the gods gather in the darkness at Teotihuacan to bring forth the sun. Two gods were chosen for the task. Tezcatlipoca, a rich, powerful, and haughty lord, and Nanahuatzin, a weak, poor, scab-covered god. A huge pyre was built for a fire sacrifice. The gods called upon Tezcatlipoca to throw himself into the fire. 4 times he attempted to do their bidding, only to stop short. Then Nanahuatzin gathered his resolve, ran, and leaped into the flames, where his body was quickly burned up. Shamed at his earlier timidity, Tezcatlipoca also jumped into the fire, followed by an eagle and a jaguar. For their bravery, these 2 animals became warriors, patrons of the 2 great Aztec military orders. A great light appeared as Nanahuatzin rose in the east as Tenochtitlan, the sun god. Then Tezcatlipoca also rose as a second sun. The gods worried that the world would be too bright, so they threw a rabbit at Tezcatlipoca to dim his light. He became the moon, on whose surface a rabbit can still be seen today. But the sun did not move in the sky. The god sent a falcon to ask Tenochtitlan why he did not move. He replied, "Why? because I'm asking for their blood, their color, their precious substance. The gods realized they must sacrifice themselves to make the sun move across the sky. Quetzalcoatl performed the deed, cutting open the chests of the gods and removing their hearts to offer up to Tonatiuh. And so the sun assumed its correct path across the sky. The Aztecs believed that just as these gods sacrificed themselves for the sun, so too people had to provide blood and hearts to keep the sun going. Batay's version comes from Sahagún, Bernardino de Sahagún, a Franciscan priest who has a 12-volume history of the Aztecs. And so it's much more detailed than this. So, Página 7. How we doing, Maura? Piece of cake. Girard's rereading of the Sahagún version used by Batay doubts what the Aztecs claim happened so long ago in the place called Teotihuacan. He sees a mythologized narrative of persecution. Girard suspects that self-sacrifice is a lie and hardly fitting on the part of the powerful, that is, the gods who gathered in the dark to bring forth light. In probing for a deeper truth, Girard asks, why does a creation myth exalt the tale of self-sacrifice if, upon a closer look, one can ascertain a prehistorical crisis? In his rereading of this origin story, Girard uncovers 4 characteristics. First, Girard notices an element of constraint in the behavior of each god before the fire sacrifice. The first god is clearly a volunteer, for nobody has chosen him. But the second god, Nanahuatzin, does not volunteer. He is chosen. Later on, the reverse is true. Nanahuatzin freely throws himself into the fire, while the first god, Tezcatl, who was encouraged by the crowd at least 4 times, only volunteers after Nanahuatzin has made his move. Contrary to what literary structuralists might assume about differences in the symmetries, Girard argues it is never the difference, but rather the symmetries, the aspects shared by the victims, that are the most revealing. While the myth exalts the greatness of these 2 gods for their seemingly heroic actions of self-sacrifice, Girard notices that they both suffer a situation of constraint. The little pockmarked god shows great docility. He exalts in the idea of dying for such a wonderful cause as the birth of the sun, but he is not a volunteer. Unquestionably, all the gods share in the weakness. They are frightened, intimidated, and dare not offer themselves for that job. While myths generally may tend to overlook or downplay weakness in godlike figures, in this case, observes Girard, it is a weakness that the pockmarked one displays briefly before he courageously undertakes the mission entrusted to him. So the god Nanahuatzin is described in the story with the most distinctive feature, a stereotype of persecution, that is the preferred signs of a victim. That's the second stereotype. These are his sores or pustules, which clearly identify him as a kind of leper. Girard interprets this marking in an obvious fashion as someone stricken with the plague, the embodiment of contagious disease. He is mockingly called in the Sahagún account Buboso by all the other gods present. It is interesting that they only pick on him after they have excused themselves one by one, being afraid to accept the invitation to self-sacrifice. But once called upon, again, Nanahuatzin did not volunteer. The Buboso, courteously accepts the invitation and jumps into the fire. So I'm going to conclude here real quickly. 1 minute. At page, I go to the very end here. So here on page 12 is a summary of the entire paper, but basically I'm trying to examine all 4 stereotypes in terms of what Girard does with that myth. And finally, my main objective is, at all these conferences, I come to I want people to notice what Girard sees, but in Mesoamerican studies, Girard doesn't make any sense for many anthropologists and archaeologists. So this is the only essay he's written about this sort of a mythos, and Mesoamerican literature is just full. It's just this treasure trove waiting to be mined. So this is my poor attempt to point anthropologists in the right direction. So thank you for listening. I'm sorry I didn't get the whole paper, but...
Thanks, Miguel. It made a ton of sense. I went to the Anthropology Museum yesterday, and it's so fascinating. And for me, it's just been a revelation to realize that this has been like the biggest city in the Western Hemisphere for most of the last few thousand years. It's just crazy to think about. Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm always struck by is how much Girard makes total sense of these events in this civilization. And, the sort of advantage and disadvantage of this culture that the Spanish encountered was it was just super big. It worked really well. And there was just a lot of evidence for the kind of things that other cultures with equally violent foundations find ways to cover up. The thing that confused me between the plenaries today and your talk and being at the museum was that the network of trading was so extensive. And I kind of think of trade as a way to just keep the violence at bay. And so I guess my question would be not really to your paper, but just to help me interpret my last 2 days.
Yeah.
But do how could they trade so much, but then also have such an extensive...
Right. Of course, trade was built up over a couple centuries with the Aztecs, but it had been before that since Teotihuacan days. Extensive networks by very professional traders who had their own little private armies, to protect, like a police force, because it was a dangerous thing to travel that far. But the Aztecs would set up posts all the way down. But the thing that I noticed this morning is you have to understand Mexica Aztec society in a very complex fashion. If you just focused on human sacrifice, you'd kind of have a distorted view. And so while everything Girard is saying about sacrifice applies, it's hard to see when you're a fish in water. For them, it was like, this is what we do, and this is the way. But what's interesting is they never sacrificed their own people. They always taken from everybody else's people. And so those other people were quite upset. And when Cortez comes along and says, hey, we'll join you, we got some unfinished business, So it's a totally mimetic, chaotic moment, the fall of one civilization, the rise of another, but it's still built on sacrifice, one way or another.
Hi, my name is Oliver, and I'm from the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I, like you, believe that Girard works for Mesoamerica like crazy good. Rabin al-Achi, do you know?
Yeah, Rabin
al-Achi is a great example of that. Yeah. And I think that one of the challenges for us to apply Girard theory as written by Girard to Mesoamerica is exactly what you just said. It's like there are a whole bunch of sacrificial cultures that are sort of independent and work across kind of grabbing one another's enemy warriors. I mean, in the Maya Highlands and so on, this is very common, I think. And I guess my question is, what is sacrificial crisis when, what am I trying to say here? When Girard talks about sacrificial crisis, it tends to be kind of, there's a society that's in crisis. Well, here we have a whole bunch of societies, which, as the gentleman here says, are very well ordered. They don't look like they're in crisis, but on their edges, they're like always in crisis. And every one of them is kind of in crisis. And I guess I'm just trying to ask, how do you conceive of sort of war and sacrificial crisis, the enemy captive as scapegoat in Mesoamerica? And how do you work out the complexities of that? Because you're talking about many different sacrificial, all interacting through trade, as we just said, as opposed to the Girardian model, which tends to be monocultural.
Well, David Carrasco's book, City of Sacrifice, which examines Aztec culture of sacrifice, and space, the use of city as space and symbol. But, the Aztecs were very clever. They became very clever at inviting their associates, their friends, their allies even, to come and have a great feast, sit with them, and then watch a great sacrifice like you'd watch an Irish soccer game, and they'd see the amount, it was like over the top. And so order was established. It's like a saint out of the Godfather or something. Yeah, you're going to play the game or not. So I think it was through demonstration, and that's why Aztec sacrifice became far more intense than any other Mesoamerican group, far more than the Maya. Well, by sacrifice of Christ, I understand the crisis of too much similarity, when they're too much alike and there's a lack of differentiation. And I think that was often happening in cycles. Quickly.
It's more or less a reprise of something I asked earlier, but I'm always, I feel like I've approached this material more in this kind of triangulated way through how it's represented by the Spanish, and then interestingly kind of gets plugged into debates within the Reformation and Counter-Reformation, so that, what's curious is like the stereotypes of persecution that Girard is observing directly there become kind of concern to, first people like Las Casas, who are saying, okay, they're sort of exaggerating the evils of these civilizations in order to justify that, the conquistadors are doing this in order to justify their own atrocities. And so they're kind of, this is, I would say, kind of where eventually you get the Aaron's book that was mentioned this morning, like this, it's a version of like the innocent native, and actually, the persecutors are the conquerors, and they're making up terrible things about them to justify their own atrocities. Then, interestingly, the Protestants kind of come in and take all this literature of human sacrifice and cannibalism, and then turn it against the Catholics and say, why are the actual cannibals and people doing human sacrifice? So it's like, it's interesting how this, and I think what you could also say here is that there's a sacrificial crisis in Europe that sort of intersects with the final phases of the civilization as it's kind of evolving into something else in the Americas. So I'm just curious if you have questions.
Well, Las Casas exaggerated the atrocities of his own people, the Spaniards, to get their attention. And so exaggeration must play a role, I suppose, in that mode of writing, legal writing and so forth. But too much is too much. So, good point. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mara.
Okay. First of all, I beg your pardon because my English is awful. But I try to make an effort, a final effort for you in this hard day, And I only want to present you a sample idea. There is an anthropologist in Spain, very famous. The name is Julio Caro Baroja. Something of you? No. Okay. He has dedicated all the life researching about the origin of the festivals, carnivals all over Europe. For me, he don't have the key to understand what he is talking about, because their work, his work, He's between 60s and 60s and 70s, no? And he don't know Girard work, no? And because of that, he's always talking about this is a mystery, I can understand, but everywhere is the same. I try to explain that, but I don't find the key, okay? Bien. I want to present you a little video clip that he records with Spanish television to present you on the Carnival of Lanz, a small town in Navarra, in the north of Spain. But it's the same that you can find in the Fastnacht in Colonia, in the Fallas of Valencia. Do you have listened about it? What is Fallas? No? Okay. Everywhere we can find the same idea. No. I want to present you this video clip, and after we talk about briefly. No. Do you understand me? Yes. Thank you very much. There is no voice, I think, because there is not baffles. There is not. But I will tell you what he's saying. This is a monster called Miel Otzin. It's a giant. He's walking by all the streets in the town. There are a lot of masks. People, these guys, immersing their role, the social role in the town. They take him like a prisoner and go to the court to be just. And look at that. They accuse him of all the sins of the city. With their hands, they are expressing this idea of satanic accusation, no? Okay? The bronze is like weapons, no? It's a symbol of weapons.
What?
Yes. They try to, yes. They try to escape from the center of the city and go to the mountains to escape, no? But at the end of the mountains, somebody is waiting him and make him to return to the center of the town. Is the expression of the winter in Spain, and changes to the springtime. This is before Lanz, no? The music is increasing time by time, but expressing this tension, this hard tension of all the people. Intenta huir al mente, pero las máscaras lo fijan. They condemned him to death because the judge was reading the songbook. Yes, remembering what the sins that he have committed. Somebody tried to kill him. This is an addition, no? Historical addition, says Julio Caro Baroja. The mass go to catch him, destroy him, dismember him, like a Dionysius the Asparagmos. They and then the rest of the body was burned in a great fire. And look at that.
Ceremonial. Y algunos hombres mayores
And then they began to dance around him in an eternal dance all the morning. Only the warriors, only males. No, the women only are spectators. No, don't participate in these rites. Yes. They are looking for trance, to come in trance, and because they have drink a lot all the morning, and the priest is participating in the rite. This has been recording in 60s, okay? Look at the fire and disappear the monster. And after this experience, everybody goes home and forgets everything. And this is the beginning of the Lent, no? They stop the excess of drinking and eating or something like that to begin a new space, a new time of okay, finish. Can you put the slides now? Only to go ahead. No, it's my time. Sí. What is representing this clip is plenty of clips of this kind of in his books, and there are a lot of examples everywhere, no? Telling the same story, no? What he says is this shocking idea, no? Is a cultural mystery, the symbolic representation of telluric forces, representing a lynching, reproducing similar staging of the scapegoat persecution systems, but he can understand the main idea, because I think that there is not a theory about the scapegoats yet in 60s in Spain. No, he has not read Girard, no, to understand that. But his some intuition of these anthropologies are very, very, very acute, no? And the victim is chosen as a king of the carnival and executed at the end of the ritual in the carnival, clearly symbolically, no? And after a cohesive community dance, each one returns to daily life and something like that. The outline of this representation is this, no? You can find the same in the randonesque carnavalesque, the Jean-Pierre Dupuy in Brazil, for example, or Roberto da Mata también is the same, a great colleague that studied the Brazil Carnival, no? The Carnival is the same. Insulting those who pass by, making public scandalous facts that should remain secret, mocking the private lives of the others, destroying objects, moving them, quarreling with certain people, throwing objects to the others or at the others, destroy the existing social order, to abandon one's own repressed personality, and to plunge into a collective unconscious, no? This is one of the book re-editated, no? The elements that compose this stories, people that disguise, inverting the role, the social role, no? The normal, the daily role, no? Giants, city pots is a doll to beat, no? Rules that simulate weapons, chase along the ring roads and narrowing the circle, false judgment, burning of the giant puppets, dance around, back to everyday life. This is the outlines, the scheme, no? This is the city pot, is dressed with a hay to protect himself of the beating, no, the people, and children laughing about him is something, you know, I don't know in English what is the name, but is representing a lamp, No, yes, no, okay. What is the idea that we can find, for example, in the Feast of the Dead here in Mexico? If you have read Octavio Paz, Los laberintos de la soledad, he tried to reproduce this idea that the Feast of the Dead is the same scapegoating mechanism, no? Is an evolution of from human sacrifice to the animal, and from the animal to the object that simulate and represent it as a proven fact of the cultural anthropology. This is the main idea, no? The special victim is representing, no, the culpability, the guilt of a person that destroy the order, the social order, no, like Dionysus, like Oedipus, like every figure that Girard shows us, no. The representation is the destruction of everywhere, this moral order, social order, and the degree is all inverted, no, in this feast. And when arrives the agreements, the communion, all of them go to it all together in the center of the town, no, drinking and eating until be exhausted. No, and this is in Valencia, for example, in the fires, after get the victim in fire, they explode in a joy, in a terrible joy, because they cry, they shout, etc. At the end of that is a big or great mascleta. Mascleta is bombs. I don't know, very noise, very great noise, like ¿cómo se dice petardos? I don't know. I don't. But yes, terrible, because yes, it's like a war. It's a simu. Okay, but it's like a great war, no? It's terrible. The floor tremble, etc. All is a simulacrum, interchangeable theatrical roles with folkloric that try to undifferentiate people, and then when the festival finish, redifferentiate the order. And in this ritual, the objective of this ritual is to spell out our sins over the heads of this special victim, and then spell it out. We come back to the order, social order, the daily. Okay. There are a lot of samples, but I finish if you want. Nothing else. But the same says Octavio Paz, como decía, the idea of fármacos of Derrida is important to understand this idea of ambivalence of the victim, no? Adore it, hate it at the same time, but because it represents the community, no? Okay, this is the Carnival of. Okay. Bueno.
Like how these festivals arrive, they're not totally geographically separate, and how does the transmission of cultures, I mean, if it's seen everywhere, one explanation is that migration and the transmission of the culture is there, and they're not just locally spontaneous, although they could be, but because of, like, what is the explanation of the universality of it across time? Because migration wouldn't, you would include bringing part of your culture if you have to leave for some disruption or something like that, and is that traced, like say in just in Spain or something like that, that the difference, that the similarities can be traced chronologically of culture migrating to each other and blend.
I think, humbly talking, that these festivals and this representation is only to make current some cultural fossils of the sacrifice. Otra vez, que pienso que todas estas representaciones son la actualización de un fósil cultural, que es el sacrificio. Do you understand, more or less?
Yeah.
Because in this adaptation to the times, always is changing the representation. For example, Julio Caro Baroja says, I can understand why a man with a gun go inside the square and shot him, because this what this representation is several centuries before this idea. But in the history, we add some aesthetics ways to represent something like that. The question is, we have to shot him or to kill him. How? The times are changing, like Dylan says.
In the same way that cultures have canons of literature that they reenact, for example, Shakespeare, are these festivals a form of ruin reenactment?
Yes. And I agree with McKenna, because for me, the parliament and the soccer, the stadium, the sports everywhere is the same. A rivalry, representing a rival. Yes.
It's not so much a question, but just gratitude for those images. In particular, and it also got me thinking about San Fermin, which I have never thought about in this context, but it's a sacrificial moving of an animal to a place but people get involved and all of this. But the image of using brooms as weapons is perfect because they're for sanitization. So it's purification and violence united in one gesture. That's why the gun isn't really effective. You need the brooms. And also in the moment of setting the effigy on fire, they cluster so that there's no way to assign agency to anyone. And that's the image of a kind of sanitization. And it goes back to also the political gatherings like a Nazi rally, or I work on Capitol Hill sometimes, and the orchestration and sanitization of a hearing, let's say. I think the sanitary is something that has to be included in our inventory of these sacrificial motifs. It's just a comment.
I agree with you totally. But I have been studying bullfights in Spain. Is very it's a political question, very, very strong now in the debates in the parliament, you know? And they are closing bullfight squares. Barcelona, for example, has been transformed in a mall, the square for the bullfights.
To join a bit with Andrew's paper, to me it really speaks to the memory continuing through the bodily, not through the mind, that they continue to do this, not because they've lost a narrative, but they haven't lost the ritual. And somehow people are very, very angry when they lose their rituals. So this discussion about the bullfight is not an easy one for people, because they don't even know why they want rid of it, why they don't want rid of it, but they just don't want rid of it because it belongs to who we are. So there's something about, and the way even San Fermin and all these ones, there's a huge movement to retain them, because without them we don't know who we are, even if we don't understand what's going on, because it recreates community in itself.
Yes, I think. I agree with you. Yes, to create the sense of communities.
That we are people of the ritual.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay. Thank you very much.